if you went to India and you saw some of the sadhus, they wear these orange robes or orange clothes, which represent fire, or tapas. Tapas in Sanskrit means burning. So burning away of all desires. The sadhus recognize that they don't want to be subject to desires of the world, because then their mind will move and then they can't meditate. So they're trying to break out of those desires. And so they do practices like go into silence. Like, as an example, one of the practices I'll be doing soon enough over July 4th time, I think like the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th, or something like that, I'll be in silence. I won't be speaking. And I'll also be turning off my cell phone. So that's a good example of what's called tapas, or stopping a particular desire, because I find myself looking at the cell phone and texting too much. And this is virtually a whole societal issue. We're hooked to our cell phones, so it's not surprising. And so one of my practices will be simply to stop doing that for about 2.5 days, almost 3 days or something like that, and just focusing on my spiritual practices, which is chanting a mantra, meditation, contemplation, reading spiritual books, and things like that. I may even include listening to some spiritual YouTube videos, but only spiritual ones. So that would be an example of releasing a desire that I have for just a little while, so that I could put more of my time on spiritual practice, and I can soften that desire to check my cell phone, and also to talk, because there's always this sort of desire to talk. And that conserves the energy of talking, and that energy then can be used to go within. So once you let go of a desire, you may have trouble at first, because the mind oftentimes revolts against it, but after 1 or 2 days, it won't be a problem. It'll be easier. It's just the initial hump. And then all that energy that I was used for talking could go into activating, let's say, Kundalini, or activating life force and empowering spiritual energy within the being. So extremely helpful. That's a Shiva path. That's a lot of the people who follow Shiva will do those types of practices. This is sort of a modern thing. It's like some of the sadhus would sit in or stand in cold water in a river for an entire day and just meditate to get out of the pain of the cold. Or they would sit in heat next to a hot fire or something for hours, and then just try to meditate to get out of the pain. So they do a little bit more serious practice than I do. I'm just like doing something simple. I mean, kind of simple, comparatively at least, but really good for spiritual evolution and increasing that inner fire. And as the inner fire grows, so does your spiritual energy, and then your consciousness will expand and you'll go into meditations. That's why great beings like Buddha went for about 48 days without eating, and he sat underneath the Bodhi tree and meditated, and then he was faced with all his demons. But after doing that severe tapas, he achieved nirvana, right? He achieved that supreme state. That's why Jesus went into the desert for 40 days, virtually fasting and focusing on spiritual practice and prayer. And after that, his power was increased. every time Jesus went back into town to go heal people, just before he did it, he would usually fast for a day or 2 or 3 days. He would not, eat anything, and maybe, who knows, he probably even went in silence sometimes, but at least didn't eat anything. And then that would clear his system so that the more spiritual energy could be flowing through his system. Then he would go and heal people. He'd place his hand on their head and suddenly they would be healed, or their eyes would be healed, or whatever it was. So he also did this practice as well.